always say, if you can make 20, you can make 200. If you can make 200, you can make 2,000. If you can make 2,000, you can make 20,000 because it's cumulative learning. So if you don't start with that 20, you're not going to get to that 20,000. If you're looking for a side hustle, then you're going to look for the skill set that you can monetize as quickly as possible. I call it simple and soon. What can we get up and running like in 48 hours? If you're at your current job now, are you making yourself ultra valuable, or are you complaining, I hate this place? Which I can understand. You can hate this place and still make yourself valuable so you can get paid more or get paid more someplace else. You know, we have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for. And so many people leave so much power on the table. And when you leave power on the table, you leave money on the table.
69% of households have less than $1,000 in emergency savings. What do you see as like the main reason why people are underwater or they feel such a pressure when it comes to their finances?
For one, I would say that...
Okay, one thing before we get into the show, I just want to say a huge thank you. 8 months ago, I said that I had this crazy goal of hitting 100,000 subs on this channel. At the time, I had 600, and I did not imagine that the show would take off in the way that it has. And let me tell you, this last year, it's been an absolute roller coaster. There's been so many ups and downs, but here's been the one consistent thing. I want to keep making this show better for you. So here's the deal. Please subscribe to the channel, and in return, we're going to continue to scale the production, scale the guests, scale the marketing, every little aspect of what we do to make this a better show for you. So please subscribe, help us hit that 100K dream. And back to the show. In 2019, you signed a law, or you helped sign a law in New Jersey that made it mandatory for financial education to be integrated into all middle schools in New Jersey. And so I wanted to start by just explaining to anyone that's listening, what's the value in their life of being good with money?
So I was fortunate to grow up learning about money at home. So my mom kind of taught us the practical components of money, so both my parents are Nigerian. My mother's a master at negotiating. Like, she's not paying full price, even if it's Macy's, you know? And then my dad was a CFO and an accountant and had his bachelor's in finance and his master's in economics. And so we just learned about money, my sisters and I. It just was, it wasn't something that we thought about. It was just something that always came up. You wanted to buy something, they would always be teaching a lesson about money. And for me, what it did is that it built a foundation where I was not afraid of money. I was not afraid to learn. I was not afraid to navigate. And it created a space where the knowledge base started early. I knew how to budget. I knew how to save. I knew how to dig my way out when I made mistakes. And I thought, well, what if other kids could have what I had coming up? Like, how different would that be? And so at the time, my friend, her name was Angela V. McKnight. She was an assemblywoman, and she had taken one of my financial education classes. And then she got appointed or elected assemblywoman in Jersey City. And she said, my first order of business, Tiffany, is I want some sort of financial law or bill. Can we talk about it? And I said, sure. And so we started meeting, and I told her, as a former school teacher, this is what I think it ought to look like. And so we start to put together some of the words, meet with other stakeholders like superintendents and teachers and things. And it took just about 3 years. And the bill got presented and voted on, and it passed. It's law A1414, the Budgetnista law. And so it wasn't, honestly, Colum, it wasn't until, because, you do a thing, but sometimes it doesn't absorb. It wasn't until my neighbor, Rihanna, I was hanging out at her house. She has a daughter, Olivia, who is in middle school, and she was doing her homework. And sometimes I would help Olivia with her homework. So Olivia was struggling, and Rihanna said, why don't you ask Miss Tiffany to help you? I said, sure, show me. I was on the couch. And I was like, wait, you have money homework? Why are you, you have money homework. Oh my God, that here, Olivia, who I love so much, this little girl, is a direct recipient of that work. She was doing financial education homework, and that's what I was helping her with directly because of the law I passed. And so now Olivia gets to get what I got, and hopefully she will be able to be even better than I am now.
That's special. I love that you called it the Budgetnista law as
Yes.
well. It's like paying it forward. It's interesting because I think financial literacy and people not feeling comfortable or confident in their finances is such a huge problem.
Yeah.
I wanted to read out some stats actually.
Okay.
So a 2023 survey found that 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Another stat, according to the Associated Press, 69% of households have less than $1,000 in emergency savings. A final stat, according to CNBC, 34% of all Americans have $0 in savings. And so even just when I read out a few of them, and there's more, like there's tons and tons of stats like this where when you read it, it's alarming.
Yeah.
And even for me personally, like I've had so many moments where I'm like, I don't know what to do with this financial situation. And so to me, it almost feels like a systemic problem. Like
Yes.
it feels like such a widespread problem. And I know from what you do with the book and your programs and the events that you go to, you speak with so many people that have these issues,
Yes.
that they're part of these statistics. And so when you reflect, what do you see as like the main reason? What stands out as the biggest reason why people are underwater or they feel such a pressure when it comes to their finances?
Well, one, there's just a lack of access to culturally aligned information, because there's so many books out there, and try reading them. You're like, you have to have like a doctorate degree in economics to understand many of these books, right? And so I started the Budgetnista, and why I wrote Get Good with Money is like, can I create a manual, a money manual that you don't have to have graduated from Harvard, you know, summa cum laude in order to understand. So one, it's like, is there access to education? And more, it's become more accessible. Social media, with all its flaws, has created accessibility to financial education. Not all of it's good, but at least it's accessible. And now, if you were to ask me now, the truth of the matter is, even with financial education, um, things are so expensive. Things are so expensive. So, for example, it's from 1980 to 2020, the expense for college has gone up 180%. Now, wages have not gone up 180%. So how does one afford college? Imagine how much homes have gone up. They have not kept track with wages. So how do you afford a home? You will hear somebody's great grandma say, "Well, when I was your age, I bought a house." Yeah, grandma, it was $2. You know what I mean? Like, compared to what you made, you were making 10 and it was $2. Like, I literally got an email from a woman yesterday that said, I am a physician's assistant, and I don't know what her husband does, but she said, I make 175, which is good money. My husband makes 80. That's $255,000 a year. I live at home with my mother in California. Will I ever be able to move out? In what world is $255,000 not able to move out? She lives in San Jose. She wants to be able to buy a home. I said, what the hell? Let me see. How much money? I Googled, how much money do you have to make in San Jose, California, in the Bay Area? How much money do you have to make in order to afford a home? Do you know it said $454,000?
No.
What does that mean? That your household income has to be that the average home where she lives is $1.3 million. So I thought maybe she's being irresponsible. No, this woman is making good money, and good money is not good enough. And so I think that's the new issue, is that good money is not good enough. And that's a problem that has to be solved. To me, that's a social justice problem, because you do all the things, you go to school, you make all this money, and inflation, the economy has made it where it's just not good enough. So something has to be done that's beyond I budget and saved.
You know what? I think when you explain that, you're exactly correct. And it leads to this feeling of like hopelessness,
Yeah.
because it's not even necessarily that I screwed up all of these things and I got all of these things wrong and my life just didn't turn out as it should. It's like I actually got the things right. I
Yeah.
got the job. I got the degree. Everything was correct, but it's like everything around me has changed. The economy, the environment, the housing market, the job market, inflation. And I think people just feel like so many things are out of their control.
Yeah.
And so later we're going to get into how can someone be good with their money in today's age and what that means, even if they're starting from nothing. But to begin, I wanted to kind of go into your story.
Okay.
And you spoke about, you had these kind of early money lessons. These lessons that kids in middle school are now learning because of your law. You had that built into your home.
And so can you kind of explain some of that? If I wanted to understand your early context with money and finances, what are some of the kind of key experiences I would need to know?
Okay, quick break. One of the most annoying things when you watch business content is you hear these great ideas about how you can make more money or start this amazing side hustle, only to find out that in order to get started, you need to invest 10,000, 15,000, even $20,000 first. I remember I found it so frustrating because I didn't have that when I was getting started with my business. And that's why I'm so excited to introduce the sponsor of today's episode, our friends at the Premium Ghostwriting Academy. Now, the Academy was founded by Dickie Bush and Nicholas Cole, two people that we've actually had on this show before, and they've built successful ghostwriting businesses to over $3 million in revenue. And using what they learned, they've helped hundreds of other people build their own ghostwriting businesses. And now they're giving away a free 5-day email course to help you build a profitable ghostwriting side hustle. And here's the key part: without any upfront investment or having to build an audience online first, you can get started right away. And it's going to teach you how to find and land high paying ghostwriting clients and charge premium prices, even if you've never ghostwritten for someone else before. And the thing that really I love about this program is that Dickie and Cole made it so easy to get started. And here's the key: when you get started, you build momentum. And when you build momentum, you achieve outcomes you never even dreamed of. So, go to the link in my description, sign up for this free 5-day email course. It's going to get you started with ghostwriting, and thank me later. Now back to the show.
Probably, there's a few things that I remember, and some things I remember remembering because I was so young. So my first memory of money was I probably was maybe 4 or 5. Um, so I grew up in a household where there's 5 girls. So I'm one of 5, and my parents, and so we didn't have much money. Even though my dad was an accountant, my mom was a nurse with 5 kids. It doesn't go as far as you think. So we were probably lower middle class, maybe even lower than that if I'm thinking back on it. And during the summertime, we I mean, every child that I know of loves ice cream. And so in order to mitigate the cost of ice cream, my dad would do an ice cream day, which meant that on your day, you could get $1. Everybody else had to come inside and get ice cream from the freezer. But so he wanted us to feel special, like, oh, the ice cream truck is here. I'll give you $1. And so my day, I'm the second born, was Tuesday. And so we're playing outside. I hear the ice cream truck. I run inside because I know if I don't know anything else, I know today is my day. But I also had a water issue where I used to love the sound of running water. I was feng shui before feng shui was a thing, apparently. And so I used to literally turn on the water. And like, if you turned it off, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with like toddlers. I mean, you think you're tough, they're tougher. So if you turned off my water, it's gonna be a problem in this house. And so my parents were like, "What do we do, Tiffany? Like, we cannot afford for Tiffany to have the water running, and then she has a meltdown every time we try to turn it off." And so my dad figured out very quickly that he had to make what mattered to me what mattered to him matter to me financially.
Mm.
I don't care about the water bill. What does that mean when I'm 4 or 5? What I care about is my ice cream. So I go in for my dollar. He said, up. So my dad is Nigerian. My Nigerian Igbo name is Odochi. So this is what my parents call me. So he said, Odochi, you just missed the waterman. And I was like, I'm sure I was like, sir, I don't know what you're talking about. The ice cream man is about to leave. That's who I'm worried about. He said, no, I had to give him $1 because every time you run the water, we have to pay him. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? He said, yes. And I didn't have any money. I only had your ice cream day dollar. And I just remember being like, I don't understand. And he's like, yes, every time you run the water, it costs money. What is important to him? And I didn't have money, but I had your dollar. What's important to me for ice cream? So now all of a sudden, guess who stopped running water?
Mm.
Because instead of like bullying me into it, I was like, I could self-police because I'm like, if running water means I can't have ice cream, child, turn the water off. So I had a meltdown, cried myself to sleep, but I never ran the water unnecessarily again because I knew it meant that I might not get ice cream the next week.
Mm.
And so that was one of my earliest lessons. And it just stuck with me about that money does not care about, like what you choose. You just have to be more mindful of like what's actually important to you.
Mm.
You know, like, are you going to choose water or are you going to choose ice cream? You know, so we all have these choices. So even in these really hard times, you know, we have choices that we can make when it comes to our money. What are we going to choose? So I chose what was aligned to me, which was I wanted to be able to have ice cream. But in order to have that, I had to make another choice external, which is I have to be smarter with the way I run water.
Mm.
And that's what it looks like to make financial choices and how you make wise financial choices that align with you now.
Mm. You know, it's interesting. It's such a relatable example. I have a number of siblings, and I know one of the things in our household, and it like frustrates the hell out of my mom, is leaving the lights on.
Yes.
Like you leave the house and like the lights in the bedroom, the bathroom, everything's been left on.
Yes.
And it's like your dad did such a good job
Yes.
of making it relatable to
Yes.
you, of making you feel the pain of what that is.
Yes.
Um, I'm kind of curious when you were younger growing up, because you even mentioned um, one of 5 kids. There wasn't like a ton of money going around. How aware of that were you? Because I think when we're kids, it's kind of just our life. We don't think about, oh, I got money, and then the family down the road has more money, or we're rich, or we're poor and they're rich. How aware of kind of your standing financial circumstance were you at an early age?
So I was like aware in a meta sense, but not aware externally because I mean, you live in a neighborhood where everyone's house is the same size as your house, all the other kids. I mean, I remember there's certain things that we didn't have. There was a girl down the street, Danielle. She was an only child. Well, she had an older brother, but he'd since moved on. She was basically an only child, and so she always got the Barbie dream house and things like that. And I remember thinking, we don't get those things here. So I was aware kind of that. And Danielle always had really cute clothes. My mom she also sewed. She was a nurse, but she knew how to sew. My grandmother was a seamstress, so sometimes she would make our clothes. And I noticed that Danielle didn't have that. But what I also love is that Danielle was generous, that when she outgrew them, I couldn't wait for her hand-me-downs. I was like, don't mess that up because in 2 weeks that'll be mine. So I was like aware that we didn't have, but I was also aware that there was still a way to have, if that made sense.
Mm.
So it didn't make me feel bad not to have. And I also remember because my dad would bring up money. So if you wanted something, again, he would always tie it to what, what was important to him and to me. So for the lights, he would say he would put the light bill on the dining room table, the one from the month before and the current one, and he would highlight, like it went up or it went down. And if it went down, he would put money into a jar for vacation.
Mm.
And so now we're all incentivized, turn off the daggone lights. I want to go to Disney World. You see what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I was aware of money and how it related to my life as a kid. Like, if I want to have these things, these are some of the external choices that we have to make. So I was aware that way. But I also was aware that we didn't have as much, but it didn't mean that we didn't enjoy as much, if that made sense.
There was still joy in the home.
So much joy. Like, I mean, you have 4 sisters. I mean, I had such a good time. I lived on a kid block. Like, for every sister, there was someone who was her age. And so everyone loved to play at our house because there were so many kids there already. And it was a really safe, like, time. And so we would just be running up and down the block, going in and out of each other's homes. Like, my parents, couldn't necessarily afford for us to have like a crab bake or crab boil. But I remember this girl, Adari, her parents could. And so when they had crabs, we'd all go over there and eat. But on Sundays, my mom made us pancakes. And I remember my friend Caroline, her brother, used to come over every Sunday because his mom didn't make pancakes. So he was this little boy who spoke no English from Colombia. So he would just say hola and just wait outside. And we would open the door and Eddie would just be sitting having pancakes with us. And so there was so much joy and there was this communal sharing. And to me, that truly is become the answer to the question that you'll probably ask me about what does it look like? And community is one of them. Like, how do we solve this issue? And so it just goes back to community. You cannot do this alone.
I think that's so important is that, obviously we're going to talk about money and there's a reality to the world. Like it's a bit nicer when you have money,
Yes.
but it's actually the things that a lot of the times we're already born with it, like community, family, people that we love being around us
Yes.
is actually more important. It's more meaningful.
Yes.
I'm curious to understand, like, what were some of your aspirations at that age? Because I know for me personally, when you're a kid, you start to have like these dreams of, I'm going to be a singer when I grow up. I'm going to be an
Mhm.
entrepreneur, or something that you saw on TV. You're like, I'm going
Mhm.
to be that person. What was kind of some of the drive? Like, what was the motivation? What did you want to be?
I always wanted to be a teacher, which I became. I wanted to be a teacher because I was bossy. I can't say I'm not bossy now. Bossy everybody at my job. I was bossy. Um, and plus two, I really loved to, I was a chatterbox. So I love that if I knew a thing, I loved sharing it. Like I'm like, if I knew a thing, I wanted you to know a thing too. But I remember very early on, I got the sense that a lot of people would know my name. I just remember literally I remember having kind of like these awakening moments when I'd be riding my bike and I just would have these moments when I'd be like, one day a lot of people are gonna know your name, Tiffany. You know? I remember especially like maybe starting in middle school and then high school too, I had this weird series of years where every time I met someone's grandmother, they'd be like, oh, this is grandma, this is my friend Tiffany. And they'd be like, baby, you're gonna be rich one day? You're
Mm.
gonna be a rich lady one day. And that would happen again and again and again to the point where it freaked me out because unrelated grandmas, and I'd just be like, okay, you know? And so I'm exactly the thing that I thought,
Mm.
exactly the messages that I got. I am a teacher and I am rich.
Mm.
Um, so, yeah, those were my aspirations. I knew very early on that I wanted to be of service, that I wanted to help. I
Mm.
grew up in a household watching my parents be of service to like our relatives back in Nigeria, sometimes sending money, sometimes people lived with us. And I just grew up that life was about service and giving. Um, and that like every blessing there's excess. And so you get to enjoy whatever blessings come your way, but from the excess, that is for everyone else,
Mm.
So I just always lived in this like state of that there is enough for me and other people around me. And so that has always carried me through. And I think it's one of the secret sauces of like the success of my business
Mm.
is that I always ask myself, not just for me, but who else too,
Mm.
you know? And so, yeah.
Yeah. You know what? It's interesting that people like saw it in you from an early
Hmm.
age. And I'm curious, like in hindsight, so in the period that you're in now, in the
Hmm.
time that you're in now, with everything that's happened, do you ever reflect on like what is it that they were seeing? Because it's such an interesting thing,
Hmm.
right? Like you could be like a young girl and people just meet you and there's something about you that they
Hmm.
see it 20, 30, 40 years into the future that you're going to achieve something. You ever think about what it was?
Yeah, and I don't know. Because even when so I have a certified financial planner, Anjali, she's awesome. And I started working with her maybe like 5, 6 years ago. And I remember at the time my business was doing okay. I mean, it was doing great, but compared to now. So it was doing maybe like $1 million, maybe 1.2, which relative to where I am now, at the time I was like, woohoo, we're big time. But I remember meeting with Anjali. So, the difference between gross and net. So the business is making like 1.2 or whatever. I am not taking home 1.2, maybe 200, 300,000. I don't know. Still good money. But I remember working with Anjali, and I was working with her because I got to a point where I said, I know how to make money, I know how to save, I know how to budget, but I've never had access to this much money. I'm not really sure beyond that. Like beyond putting my money in a 401k, in a Roth, like, I really want to start to like maximize my potential to grow wealth. And after working with me for a few months, she said, Tiffany, in the next 5 to 10 years or so, you're going to have a net worth between 50 to $100 million. And I said, show me the math. I was like, but based upon the company, we're making 1.2. I mean, maybe we might stay there, which is great, but that doesn't add up to 50 to 100 million. And she said, oh, no, 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 not based upon the company, based upon you. And it was those grandmothers over again. I said, I don't understand. She said, Tiffany, I work with ultra high net worth individuals who have net worths between 50 to 100 million, some of them. And what I see in them, I see in you. The way they navigate, the way they show up, that's exactly how you navigate and show up. But I couldn't believe it. And I remember thinking, she's just blowing smoke up my behind and now, like, there's this huge opportunity before me that will put me exactly in that position.
Mm.
And she's right within the time frame of what she said.
Mm.
And I'm like, but to your point, Colin, I don't know. I'm like, can you show me the mirror? Because I just see myself. It's crazy because I just was at a studio earlier today, and the gentleman asked me something like that, like, does it just blow you away where you are now? And I'm not gonna lie, it's hard for me to conceive of what's happening, like New York Times bestseller, a Netflix special, like an online school. We've graduated over 100,000 students. I mean, my business collectively in the last 15 years has probably made about $50 million. Um, I don't see, I still see myself as preschool teacher Tiffany, and that's the budgetnista over there, if you will. I cannot wrap my mind around because how does one go from that to this, you know?
Mm.
Um, it's like a moonshot. And so, yeah, when someone says that to me, maybe I need to like I said, Anjali told me what she saw in me, but it still blows me away because if I'm being honest, I don't see that in myself.
Mm.
I see someone who has just decided that I'm going to live a life of service. I'm going to try to do good work, help good people, and make good money. And it's turned into this. And some of it feels beyond me, and I'm just here like along for the ride in some ways.
Mm. No, it's beautiful to see, and not just like the accomplishment. It's also that your mindset has stayed consistent
Mm,
of being of service to others. Because I think sometimes when we start to achieve all of the things that we wanted, we
mm,
start to deviate away from the original mission.
yeah.
And you know what? I want to go back to the original mission because you mentioned one of your early aspirations was just to be a preschool teacher.
Just a teacher in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting reading the book because uh you get to a point pretty early in your career in your 20s where like you were pretty much living it out.
Mm-hmm.
You were a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these kind of financial and money lessons that your dad had instilled in you was like playing out in your life. You had like a ton of savings.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what? Just talk through that period of your life.
Okay, quick break. I just wanted to say thank you to my friend Arlen Hamilton. And let me start by saying this. As you go on this journey of trying to grow your business or your passion, there are certain people that come on the journey and they just help you succeed. There's no immediate gain for them, there's no payoff for them. They just want to be of service. And Arlen has been that to this channel. She came on the show back in January and recorded one of the most popular episodes that we've ever done. From there, I went to her incredible conference, Your First Million Live in LA. She's helped us get guests on the show. She's helped me figure out things in my business. She has gone so far above and beyond to help this show reach its potential. And we could not have done it without her. And it's not just me that she helps. Arlen is a successful investor and author, and she is building a media channel where she breaks down learnings, concepts, and actionable advice that will help you make your first million. One of my favorite videos from her, she explains the actionable steps you can take right now to make your first $10,000 and even how you can make your first $1,000 in the next 7 days. It's so good. And so Arlen's been a huge help to this show, and I want to pay it back. So go to the link in my description, check out her content, subscribe to her channel, and tell Arlen that we sent you. And without further ado, back to the show. Like, what would
Yeah.
be a
So I
scene?
was financially perfect if I do say so myself, and I do say so myself. So yeah, in the beginning, I just listened to what my dad told me to do. He said, make sure you save. If you're gonna get a credit card, don't get one with an annual fee. Pay it off every month in full. Save your money after college and buy not a new car, but a previously owned car. So I did. I remember I saved like $5,000 and I got a car. No car note. It meant my car insurance was lower. And so I was already laying the foundation for like my overhead was low. He said, if you want to move out, take one of your sisters with you, basically, so you can. So and I did. I remember our rent was 1,200, so divided by two, that was $600 a month.
Mm.
So these were the things I just was doing what he told me to do. Um, and so by age 25, I had saved $30,000. I had my retirement account that was external to my retirement account. I was making maybe like 40 something $1,000 a year. I had been teaching maybe 3 years plus or so by then. And the extra money, the reason I was able to save the 30 is because I babysat and I tutored on the side. And so during the summertime, when we had off, I would make an extra $5, $6, $7,000, and I would like stuff it away. Um, I was so cheap at one point. My parents thought I was struggling financially, and my dad, who's never done this, gave me his credit card and said, "Buy some clothes." And I was like, "What?" He was like, "You look crazy," and they thought I didn't have any money. I was so offended, but I took it and I bought some clothes. And so at 25, I said, I think I'm gonna buy a house. I mean, what else can I do? And so I bought a condo. and I put my down payment, and everything was financially perfect. My credit score was in the 800. Then I met someone who I call in the book Jake the Thief. And I met him on spring break, and I don't know, he's really handsome, cool, but I thought rich because he was driving a super fancy car, super fancy clothes. He wasn't that much older than me, probably his late 20s, and I was in my mid 20s. And so we kept in contact, and we stayed cool for like a couple years. So I knew him. By the time I invested with him, I probably knew him by like 3 or 4 years. And I remember asking him, "Hey, Jake, you're rich, obviously. I've been to your beautiful penthouse in New York. I've seen your Ferrari or whatever he was driving. Can you teach me how to invest? Because I feel like I've got this condo, I'm saving, but I want to take myself to the next level." And he was like, "All right, I'll teach you how to invest. The key is you want to use other people's money." I didn't know he meant my money, but and so he told me, "Do you have any credit cards?" I said, "Yes, I pay them off in full." He said, "How's your credit score?" I said, "Great." He said, "I want you to open up two additional credit cards and pull money off these cards." And I was like, "Sure, I'm stupid." So I did. And it was to the tune of, I don't know, it was like 15 or $20,000 that I pulled off. I should have known. All the red flags were there. Because one, I remember distinctly going to the bank on my lunch break. And this is when I was teaching preschool. And when at the time our uniforms were nurses' uniforms because they wanted you to like play with the kids and not have to worry about getting dirty. So you would come in with your regular clothes, change into like, the scrubs basically. And so mine was, it was like teddy bear scrubs with like these pink pants. So I'm going into the bank saying, "Hey, I'd like to take $15,000 off this credit." They thought I was being like trafficked. They brought "Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah." You would think the red flags were like, "Tiffany, Tiffany." They kept me in there beyond my lunch hour because they just kept asking me all these questions. "Are you okay? Are you being forced to do this? Is somebody around here?" I was like, meanwhile, just over my head, like, do, 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 do. So I took the money out. We had a contract, and the contract was supposed to be he lived in Paris because he was French. He was African French. He lived in Paris half the time, and he was like, "We're gonna buy commodities here and goods here in the United States that would sell well in France. I have stores in France." And we're gonna buy like Levi's and Chuck Taylors and things that like are very American that people really want out there. And I said, "Okay, that's what we're gonna use the money for. We're gonna ship it, put it in my store, and then I'm gonna send you money every week." And I was like, "Well, how much do you think this money will make me?" He said, $2,000 a week, which where did you even come up with that number?
Mm.
So $2,000 a week, and this is a 2-year contract with me. I was like, "What?" I'm doing the math, like, "Ooh, I'm about to be rich." So I had these credit cards now that I didn't have before. And I said, "Well, since I'm gonna be rich, I might as well start using these credit cards." Forgot all the lessons that my dad gave me. And I didn't use the credit cards to buy like clothes or things like that, but I used it to buy, which is turned out to basically be a scam, like a coaching program. You know how like everybody has them now? But they were doing that back then too. And so I bought one for it was like a $10,000 coaching program.
Mm.
So I went from owing nothing on credit cards because I paid them off every month to $30,000 from the cash advance that I took out, for Jake, and then this $10,000 program. And I was happy as a clam because I just knew, well, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be rich.
Mhm.
Um, so he quickly stopped picking up the phone. Week one, I'm like, "Oh, maybe he's busy. I know he just got to Paris." Week two, week three, month one, month two. So I'm calling. I am calling everywhere I could find. I'm like, "What is happening?" Sometimes he was really terrible because sometimes he would pick up and be like, "Oh, you didn't get the money? I sent it."
Mm.
And I'd be checking, like calling the bank. I would just wish he just would have stolen clean. "Just go, sir." Because he would pick up every once in a while to drop breadcrumbs and then even ask for more money.
Mm.
He's like, "You know what? It would be even better if you send me another 2,000. We could do even more." I'm like, "But you haven't given me anything so far. And if I give you that money, I won't be able to pay my mortgage." And he'd be like, "Well, okay, well, you'll get more money next week." And so I never got a penny. He disappeared. And I remember I met a friend of his who was also scammed. And that's when I realized it was a scam. So I met a friend of his and he's like, "Have you seen Jake?" I said, "No." He's like, "He stole money from me." I'm like, "Me too."
Mm.
And that's when I realized, oh, this is what he does. This is how he got all the stuff that he had, that
Mm.
he was just like a scammer. And I remember thinking, what do I do now? And I felt really, I chased him down for about a year. And I wish in that year that I would have aggressively tried to pay down the debt because I was working. And if I probably could have, because I probably could have just babysat within an inch of my life, tutored, and then, because I was really good at saving. And maybe within 2 years, I could have paid it off, but I didn't, because during that year, I said, this is not my problem. This is
Mhm.
his problem. And I didn't want to take responsibility for the role that I played. So finally, I said, Tiffany, you had to pay this debt down. And that's when I found out that my job was being eliminated. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And because here's the thing, it was a recession. It was 2019, and all my friends were losing their job. And I was like, ooh, girl, sucks to be you, because teachers don't lose their job. We're essential workers. Apparently not. So the place where I worked was a nonprofit based school, and they lost their funding. And I remember it was 3 days before the new school year. I got a phone call and said, you don't need to come in 3 days. I was like, oh, well, what day am I coming in? They're like, no days. I was like, am I being fired? They're like, no, the school is closing. I'm like, wait, schools don't close, because kids have to go to school.
Mhm.
So I couldn't even wrap my mind. I'm like, and what was worse was that I had the summer off. Remember, in the summer, I don't get paid to teach. So I was already on my last leg in the summer. So I was like, I can't wait to get my first check, starting September, because I have not, I was doing babysitting and teaching, but and tutoring, but not enough to really cover. And so I was down to my last, like, dollar, and now to find out I have no job. So now I owe $30,000. I find out I have no job. At the time, I was with my boyfriend from college for like 6 years. We broke up. And I was like, and I had this condo where I'm like, who's gonna pay this mortgage? And it was probably one of the darkest times. I won't say the darkest, but one of the darkest times, because for the first time I actually felt I'm a pretty upbeat, hopeful person. I'm sure you could tell.
Yeah.
But for the first time, I was like, I don't I don't know what to do.
Mhm.
There is no hope here. Everything is gone. My job, my money, I'm about to lose this place. Everything is gone. And I fell into a really dark depression. I didn't know it was depression then. I was probably like 28, 29. No, I remember yeah, I was 28, and I fell into this dark depression where I wouldn't let anybody come see me. I would not pick up the phone. I just stayed in the dark the whole time. I was not washing dishes. I was not washing myself. Um, and I just thought, I was just basically waiting for them to come take the place for me, because I didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to tell anyone, because I felt shame, because I was Tiffany good with her money, Tiffany. And all of a sudden, Tiffany good with her money does not have any money. Um, and yeah, I stayed like that for some months until my best friend, Linda, like kind of like bogarted her way in. She's like, what is going on? And I was like, everything's fine. Everything's fine. And then I burst into tears. And she was like, what happened? And I said, I don't have any money. I told her everything. And she was like, girl, I thought you killed somebody. What, you're broke? Is that what you're saying? I was like, yes. She was like, everyone's broke. I was like, what do you mean? She was like, do you know what a recession is? We're in it.
Mhm.
And because I had not looked up and looked around. She was like, girl, I lost my job. Our other friend lost their job, and this other friend lost their job. And I was like, wait, what?
Mhm.
And she was just like, girl, like, everyone's broke. So if that's what you're saying, like, if this is the big shame you're carrying, that you're broke, welcome to the broke club. And I remember she said some joke, and I laughed, and she laughed, and I was like, wow, okay, maybe this is not so bad that I'm not in this thing by myself. And I called my oldest sister, Karen, and I said, what should I do? And she said, what's the worst case scenario? I said, worst case scenario, they come and they foreclose on my condo. And she said, well, what do you do then? I said, I would just have to move back home with mommy and daddy, basically. And she was like, well, why wait for that? Why not just move back home now? I was like, oh, if anybody has African parents, you're like, should I be homeless instead? I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, let me not even say that, because it's a blessing, because everybody can't do that. But I remember moving home, like I brought like a lamp, that I brought like, like my comforter, that I brought my mattress. My dad said, are you home? What's going on? And I told him, well, I didn't tell him the rest of it. I just said, well, I lost my job, Daddy. He said, okay, well, not too long. My mother, of course, was over the moon. Ah, my baby is back. And I remember though, my little sister Lisa, she's not little, but she, my youngest sister Lisa, had my high school kind of like apartment, because there was like a apartment in the basement. And so she had that apartment, and she was like, just because you're back, you can't sleep here. So I had to go back to my middle school room, the room that I slept in when I was in middle school. And I remember it was my 30th birthday in the evening, and I was laying in the bed, looking up at the ceiling in a twin bed, that had like My Little Pony sheets or something on it from middle school. And I remember thinking, I was calling myself everything but a child of God. Like, you're a loser. Look at you.
Mhm.
Like, Oh, you got your degree and you got your master's and nothing. You have no man, no money, no home. Like you have more money with the last time you laid in this bed when you were 12 years old babysitting, you had more money then than you have now as a grown 30-year-old woman. Look at you, like it's the worst. And I just remember tears streaming down my face thinking like I don't this has got to be rock bottom, I guess. Um and then I remember what Linda told me that I was not the only one in this position. And I thought to myself, okay, at the very least, when you're at your worst and you feel like you have nothing, I realized that I had to ask myself, is that true? So now I know now in therapy, like because I've been in therapy for like the last few years, but I learned this lesson in therapy that Dr. Green, my therapist, beautiful black woman therapist, taught me that when something is happening, it feels so overwhelming. She's like, let's acknowledge the feeling and say, is it true? Is it true this is the brokest you've ever been? Yes. And then she'll say, okay, is it the only truth available? And the other truth was, I'm not homeless. I am sleeping safely in my parents' house. What else is true? Well, I've got friends. Maybe they know a place where I can work. What else is true? Well, they haven't foreclosed on upon my property yet. Maybe I can rent it out in the meantime. Because what I didn't know is that New Jersey was so backed up because of the recession. They were so backed up on foreclosures. They didn't foreclose on my property for like 4 years.
Mm.
So I said, maybe I can rent it out. And I did. And I remember telling the person renting it, like, look, I can only guarantee you month to month because I don't know what they're going to do down at the courthouse, but I'll significantly lower what the rent is going to be. I was able to do that. So it was like I had told myself, I have nothing. Is that true? Do you have nothing? Or do you not have enough of what you like? Because you've got this condo that you can rent out instead of for my I think I want to say my mortgage was 1660, but I was able to rent it out for 1200. And the bank didn't want anything but 1660. So I kept the 1200 for myself. I'm like, well, now I've got unemployment and $1,200 a month to make my way.
Mm.
What else do you have? Well, Tiffany, you're really good at teaching. And honestly, at the end of the day, you are really good at budgeting and saving. So I started to teach my friends how to do it. And they were like, I think people would pay you to teach them how to do this, Tiffany. And what else do you have? So I started to stack like what I did have, even if it didn't seem like enough, and it made it enough. You know what I mean? I made it enough. And it wasn't a quick turnaround. Like I ended up moving out of my parents' house and slept on my sister's couch, Tracy. She's the third born for a year. And when I did that, I started the Budgetnista. I said, I was afraid to go back to teaching in the traditional sense because I saw it could be snatched away. Because I'm actually risk adverse. People think that entrepreneurs are so brave. It wasn't me being brave. I said, if that is the safest job in the world and those people could take it, I don't want to do that. The only person I could bet on is me. And so I said, I'm really good at teaching. I am really good at budgeting and saving. I tried to do one-on-ones. That didn't work because everyone was broke. And I didn't feel good taking money from people who didn't have money. Um, and I had to ask myself the question, like, dang, I don't have any contacts. I'm like, is that true? You did a lot of volunteer work, Tiffany. Why don't you hit them up and see if they want you to come and teach? And the United Way, someone at the United Way hit me back in Newark, and they were like, "Come on in." And I met with this woman. Her name was Catherine. She had just started working there. She's like, "We're doing programming, and right now I'm teaching a financial education class, and I hate it. Do you want to teach it?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, how much do you charge?" I was like, $300 a class." She was like, "Sure." I was like, "Damn, I should have said more." And I taught 5 classes, so that was $1,500 right there. I went from I have nothing, and is that true? Is that the only truth available? And it wasn't. So now I was teaching at the United Way, making about $1,500 a month. And I said, okay. I moved out of my sister's couch and I found a room that I rented. A couple of my teacher friends who were struggling as well said, we found this house. The lady is renting it out by the room. It was in a college part of Newark because that's very a college student thing to do. But she was like, it's just all teachers here. We're all grown in our late 20s, early 30s. So we each rented a room for $500. And I remember I had bought this 1999 Toyota Camry at the time that I'd paid off. And so it was just me and Betsy. That's what I used to call her. She was this like white car. And so I'm like, well, at least I don't have a car note for Betsy, and I can mostly walk everywhere. I was never fitter. Um, and I was in the heart of Newark, so I started to really build and network to teach outside of the United Way, and I started to grow my business. Social media started to really pop. Facebook went from Facebook is only for college students to they opened it up to the broader audience. And I started to use my personal Facebook page. There was no business Facebook then to promote myself. I changed my name from Tiffany Aliche to Tiffany the Budgetnista Aliche on Facebook and started just posting me volunteering and teaching financial education. Every time I posted, someone would hit me up and say, "Can you come do this here?"
Mm.
You know, is it true? Is it the only truth available? You have nothing. You got Facebook. You got an email. You see what I mean? You know how to teach financial education. You're personable. So I started to stack those things in my favor. And now, 16 years later, here I am, like living out things that I could never even dream of.
Mm. You know what's um you know what's interesting, even when I listen to you speak, that feeling of like there's nothing,
Mm-hmm.
such a powerful,
Yeah.
it can send you into such a negative cycle
Mm-hmm. It's a dark
and
force.
so dark. And it's like, it's not even, um, I feel like typically it's when not just one thing has gone wrong,
Yeah.
it's gone wrong in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me, there's a quote that you have in your book where you say, I was in a pretty dark financial and emotional place. In rapid succession, I had lost my job, my savings, the use of my condo, my retirement, and also my boyfriend. I really felt like I had nothing left to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had my 1999 Toyota Camry. That was something, but it wasn't much. I just remember thinking, how do you build from a place of nothing? And so I know you mentioned it, but I wanted to speak about it because I think that moment, that realization of like looking around yourself and being like, there's nothing here.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you explained, which is like, is that really true?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think sometimes we get into this self-narrative, which is so negative, it sends us into a spiral
Mm-hmm.
and we end up compounding it
Yes.
because we fall into depression, we
Mhm.
stop taking care of ourselves. The few things that we do have, we like sabotage them
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
And so I'm curious. I'm like, can you really even take us into that moment? What was the feeling for you? Like, what was the day when it really felt like it was truly rock bottom?
That was in the middle school bed on my 30th birthday. Because 30 represents full adulthood. Like, right? You're 30 years old, you're grown, grown, grown. You're not a kid anymore. There's no 2 in front of your number. So to be 30, sleeping in my middle school bed, having less money than I did when I was 12, was like, I not forget about competing against the world. I'm worse off than Tiffany. You know what I mean? And I just was like, what is happening? And I just felt ashamed of myself. That's really what the feeling was. It was deep, deep shame, you
Mhm.
know? And I just remember thinking that like it just doesn't get low. I didn't see a way out. I was just like, I guess I could teach again, but like it's too late for me to get a job now as a teacher because teachers, it's not like working like at a factory where you're packing boxes. Like you can't start the school year without a teacher. So the school year, so my school closed, but like other schools, there's not kids sitting in the classroom waiting. They have to have teachers. So those jobs were already filled. So I was just like, what do I even do? You know, like it just felt like it just felt so shameful that I had done all the things. I had checked all the boxes. You know, I'd gone to school, I'd gotten my master's, I bought a house, I did all the things. I did everything that they told me if you did it, it works out, and it was not working out. Um, yeah, and I just felt deep, dark shame. And I realized then that, um, to your point, that shame shields solutions. And so when you're in that shame, even though there might be other truths available, it's very difficult to see them, you know, because shame loves silence. It shields you from solutions. And shame is like, yeah, sit here with me, just me and you.
Mm.
There's nothing you can do. And the only way to shake shame is to give voice to it. And it's one of the hardest things to do because you have to say the very thing you're ashamed of. I had to tell my best friend Linda, I'm broke. I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't have this. I broke up with Mike. Everything. Like at the time, drained my retirement account to save the condo. So I had maybe like $50,000 or $60,000 in my retirement account. Took the tax hit, drained it, only to lose a condo. So now I'm like, you don't have retirement, you don't have savings, you don't got your man, you don't have anything, and you still owe this credit card debt of $30,000. Like, what the entire hell, Tiffany? And I have student loan debt because I had just got my master's thinking I was fancy. So now you owe the people 50,000. You owe 250, 220 on the condo. You owe 30,000 on your credit card debt, and you have no money whatsoever.
Mm.
Some other people say they're broke, but you're like, you got $2 in your pocket. No, not coins in the cushions, nothing. And so to say that out loud is so hard. But it released me because shame hates it when you bring someone else in because someone else is going to bring a mirror to say, it's not that bad.
Mm.
Linda was like, you ain't kill nobody, right? Oh, girl, if you broke, just say you broke.
Mm.
Join the broke club. It's broke time, you know? And so that helped me to lift some of the shame and see some of the solutions that actually have been there all this time.
You know what? You make I think it's actually such a good point. I love that quote of like shame loves silence.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. We had a guest on a couple weeks ago, Chris Doe, and he mentioned that like everyone's walking around with like a mask on.
Mhm.
We all have this like identity, this narrative for ourselves that we've built, and we portray that into the world.
Mhm.
When you were speaking, I think you said, I was always Tiffany good with money.
Yes.
And so it's like the real heartbreak of the situation isn't just that everything's gone wrong, it's that the identity was
Yes.
broken. And I think we've all done this. I've done it. I see a lot of people just when I'm going around the world that are doing it, which is like, it's almost like the mask falls down last.
Mhm.
Like your life can be in complete shambles,
Mm.
but the neighbor still thinks that, you know, you've got the
Yes.
good job, and your mom still thinks that you're good, and your best friend still, you're still at all the parties, the mask is still on.
Yes.
And I think the depression hits where it's like the identity is broken.
Yeah.
And people find it so, so difficult to like shed that previous identity and be the new person that their situation is forcing them to be.
You're grieving.
Yeah.
It's a loss of yourself,
Mm.
you know? Because I had measured myself based upon how good I was with managing my money. And if I'm bad at managing money, then Tiffany's bad. You know, instead of I made a mistake, it's I am a mistake.
Mm.
You know, and that's not true, but at the time, that's what it feels like.
Mm. You know what's interesting, and I think it's funny in a way because the solution is so simple.
Mm.
Of like when you shared it with Linda or whatever, like when you shared it, instantly like a burden was released.
Yeah.
But at the same time, even though I say it's simple, I know that there's someone sitting there watching this, and for them to call their mum and let them know that they lost their job and, you know, they're losing their apartment feels like the most difficult thing in the world.
Yes.
Or for them to call their best friend, to call their sister, to call their brother is like, in a way, it almost feels like jumping off a ledge to let that
Exactly.
go.
Yes.
And so for that person, I'm curious, like, is there a piece of advice that you would give them of just take this one step and it will kind of get you back on that path of things are starting to move in that positive upward cycle again?
Well, I would ask yourself, is there someone in your life that you know that really loves you? You know, an adult, you know, that loves you, somebody that really cares about you, that you feel pretty sure that, like, you know, that they're in your corner, because that's going to be that's going to be the easiest person to unload some of that shame with. Because even though I knew Linda is like my best friend, we've been friends since we were literally kids, and I was still ashamed to tell her. And one of the things I learned from Dr. Green, my therapist, is she said, you know, it is the job of those who care about us to lovingly help. We just refuse to ask for it. And so I know you think, you're listening now, I know you think everyone's busy. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to. The people that care about you want to lovingly help. I promise you. If you're like, I'm looking for a sign, this is the sign that there is someone in your life that lovingly cares about you and they're wanting to help, even if it's just to bear witness. Linda did not give me money. She did not say sleep on my couch. She didn't. I needed someone to just bear witness to the thing that I was carrying around with me by myself. I needed help carrying the shame. And she did that. And that was enough for me to then find the next solution,
Mhm.
you know? And so that's just what I can say is that it's going to require a little bit of a leap for you to say, you know what? My neighbor, she and I have been talking, and I feel like I can trust her, or my sister, or my best friend, or my work husband, or my actual husband, or somebody. Sometimes people, I'm not gonna lie, people slide into my DMs and they just make it me. If you don't have nobody else, you can make it me. They
Mm.
slide into my DMs on IG or whatever, and they'll say, I have this deep dark secret that I'm struggling with. And I'm here to say, okay, I heard you. Like, here's some resources, but it's just to release it. Like, that person didn't say, you terrible, terrible, terrible person, away with you. I don't know what we're expecting.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's gonna take a little bit of courage, quite honestly. It's gonna take a little bit of courage for you to tell that one person so they can at least bear witness, because yes, you have to give voice to this fear and this shame. And because the thing about fear is that there's an African proverb that says, fear makes the wolf bigger than he is, right? And so think about, like, on the other side of this door, you're hearing a wolf and you're just like, you're so afraid, that it's this full grown gray wolf, snarling teeth, like dripping drool. And you're like, this wolf is going to tear me up. Only to find out when you finally open the door, it's a wolf cub.
Mm.
That is not even like you imagined that. You created that story. That's not true. Remember, is it true? Is it the only truth available?
Mm.
You know? And so, like, yeah, I think getting up the courage, finding that one person, saying the scariest thing out loud, and giving yourself the space to be helped by it, whether if
Mm.
it's just, like I said, a listening ear or maybe a helping hand.
Yeah. It reminds me what you described. It reminds me there's this video online where it's like this kid in water and he's like crying and he's like holding on to something. He thinks that he's like drowning or something.
Yes.
And then he just stands up and it's like there's nothing there.
Because we tell ourselves stories, like sometimes we are committed to harming ourselves. Because here's the thing, even like, let's just say you have nothing, Tiffany. Who benefits if that's true? You know what I mean? Like, do you want that to be true, Tiffany? That you have nothing, absolutely nothing? Like, it's like you are committed to harming yourself because one, that's actually not true. And two, it's like it's not even the only truth available to you. And it's not helpful. That narrative that you're carrying around, we become really good at ruminating in the muck of it all, rolling around in the mud. It almost starts to feel good. Like, oh, my life is so terrible, nothing is good. My life is so Is that really true? And why would you want that to be true? I'd rather be delusional,
Mm.
you know? Like, I'd rather be delusional. I have a niece, Amelia, who just turned 7, and she is delusional as little kids are. But so delusional, she gets what she wants. She told me the other day, like, I'd been to the White House a number of times, and most recently, I was invited to the vice president's residence. And she said to me, Auntie, because I'd taken her to Washington, D.C. before her and her brother Roman, and we were outside of the White House, and she was upset because she couldn't go in. And I was like, Amelia, you just can't just go into the White House because she had her arm through the gate, and the Secret Service actually had to come over and tell her, little girl. So she
Yeah.
got upset, started crying. She said, why can't I go in? I said, you just can't go in the White House. She said, you did. And I was like, damn, she's right. Because I showed her pictures. You did, and you met the president. And I said, "Ugh, but Amelia, everyone can't go." She said, why? And I thought, why not? So the person that invited me to the State of the Union and the vice president's residence, whatever, I said, this is going to sound crazy, but my niece really wants to go inside the White House. And I told her, you just can't go. She said, oh, yeah, yeah, I can make that happen. When do you want to come? I said, I'm sorry, what? The lady was like, I just need a month out. Because I know if she's young, I'm sure she has summer camp. How's a Saturday? We're going to the White House. The delusion of I expect great things and great things come to me. Amelia lives in that delusion. She'll just be like, the other day for her birthday, we sang her the Stevie Wonder version of Happy Birthday. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
right? And she was like, kids get that version? She said, I thought that was just for adults. She thought that the kids get the regular happy birthday to you.
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, this is by a man named Stevie Wonder. She said, show me him. So I showed her on YouTube. I said, this is Mr. Stevie Wonder. And she said, oh, I like his music. She said, can you look up his mommy so he could call my mommy so I can meet him? And I was like, Amelia, you're not gonna meet Stevie Wonder. She was like, please. I said, okay. So he looked at his mother, but his mother unfortunately passed away. So she got really sad about that.
Mm.
And then she was just like, where's he from? And so Stevie Wonder's from Detroit, Michigan. And she's very familiar with maps. She said, that's not that far. We could go on the map. I've seen it. It's not that far. And I was just like, Amelia, that girl. Like, you're not gonna be Stevie Wonder. And so just this past, like I said, last week, I was at the vice president's residence for this Black business leadership reception. This woman in a beautiful yellow dress comes up to me, says, "Oh my God, Tiffany, love you so much. I've been following you for the longest. Like, I just love what you're doing for our community." And my friend was with her, and my friend said, "Do you know who this is?" And I said, "No." So I was telling her, "I love your dress. I love your necklace." She said, "This is Stevie Wonder's wife." I said, "I'm sorry, what?"
Mm.
I told her what my niece said, and she said, "Tiffany, why does she make a video for Amelia to say thank you so much? And I'm going to tell my husband what you said, and you never know, maybe he'll make a video or something for you." The delusion of Amelia is what we all need. Not the White House and Stevie Wonder in the same summer, but that's what I mean. The expectation of good things and the expectation that they will happen to you. Because Amelia will ask for a thing that sounds crazy, and yet here we are. Stevie Wonder, the White House. And so I want to be more like Mimi.
Mm.
That like, because it doesn't benefit me to believe in the darkness that nothing good happens. I don't have anything. It's all, I don't want to live in that space anymore, no matter what happens. I much rather be delusional about the good than delusional about the bad. And so that's what I'm wanting for everyone listening, that I know right now someone say, "Yeah, but you don't understand." But but because me, there's always this, but my situation is different. It is a lot more helpless. Everyone has to navigate something. And your situation, although different from mine, you are still human, and everyone has to navigate something hard, but not so hard that there can't be good that comes out of it?
Mm.
And so, like, yeah, because when I said before, you'd asked me about what was the darkest time, and at that time it was that, but 2.5 years ago, my husband suddenly passed away, like just out of the blue. He had an aneurysm. So that's just like, you're here. Literally, he was here on Monday. "Babe, I got a headache. I'm gonna go to the hospital." Gone on Thursday. 41 years old, 6'6", 190 pounds, like fit, like handsome. You would never think. And even from that space, I didn't think I was gonna be able to come back from that space, because how do you come back from that? We're not 80 years old and you're like, okay, this is an expectation, although sad, you know? And yeah, I had to lean on the lessons that I learned from saying I have nothing. Because I went back to that place. Everything is gone. This is the worst thing that could have ever happened. That's what I told myself. I remember telling Dr. Green, "This is literally the worst thing that could have ever possibly happened to me." And she was just like, I remember she asked me, "Is it the worst thing?" And I wanted to jump through the Zoom and choke her, if I'm being honest. Because what's worse than that? You lose your person. We had a great marriage.
Mm.
He was kind, he was loving, he was supportive. I knew him since my 20s. So this is not somebody I just met. This is a 20-year, friendship and partnership. And I remember her saying, like, "Is it the worst thing?" Because she was asking me the same thing. "Is it true? It's the only truth available." I'm like, "Yes, it is the worst thing." Then I went on, a year after him passing, I went on this trip to Kenya, and we went to this like shelter for girls, for teenage moms. And it was a nurse and her husband that created this shelter. And many of the young girls in there, they were having children, but out of being abused. Some of them by their own family members, some by their own fathers, having babies,
Mm.
and had been thrown out of the family as a result, as if it's this 13-year-old or 12-year-old fault, 12 years old and pregnant. And they're here. There's no mattresses. They're trying to figure out how they're going to fund the place, how they're going to feed these girls, how they're going to. And I remember this voice came in and says, "Is it the worst thing that could have ever happened to you, Tiffany? Because is it this? Is it being taken advantage of and abused by a family member and being thrown out of your family? You and your baby at 12? Is that what happened?"
Mm.
And I thought, okay, is it true? Is it the only truth available? And, I wrote them right then and there a $10,000 check, because I was just like, what? How can I be of service here? You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so that is what I mean about, like, you could ruminate in your stuff and acknowledge that, like, the loss of my husband is still traumatic for me, but it is not the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. I still have my family. I still have my friends. I still have my health. My husband and I were financially sound. I I have a stepdaughter that I'm still very close with. She's actually at my condo right now. like helping me like unbox some things. I'm paying for college for her. She's harassing me to get her Audi for her birthday. I'm like, girl, it's not happening.
Mm.
Like me and her mom, we always were cool. Like we co-parented very well, but me and her mom are still cool. My husband had a twin brother. I still get to see what he would have looked like, because Terrell is still very much my brother and comes by and fix things for me when I need to. So is it the worst thing? You couldn't have told me that a couple years ago. But now, like, I realize that, like, there's so much more that you have accessible to you if you're willing to see beyond what's actually happening, you
Mm.
know? And that, so for those listening who are like, well, that's easy for you to say, Tiffany. It's like, I've experienced loss in ways that most people might not ever experience. And I hope that they don't.
Mm.
And so, and yet, and still, I know it's not the only truth available to me. I refuse to live in that dark place.
Mm. Yeah. You know what? First of all, like, I'm just sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
But I think one of the things, and it was even in watching, like, even in the research process for this episode of watching other interviews you've done and then meeting you today, it's like you walk around with such a great energy and such a great enthusiasm and a humor and like a lightness. And I think it is like one of those things that's so important, which is just letting go of the identity. And it's so hard to do
Yeah.
because when these dramatic things happen in our lives, when things go wrong, you know what, it reminds me, the very first episode of this show that we released was with this entrepreneur. His name is Ruben Harris. And he goes, rejection is God's redirection. And I it's a quote that's always kind of come back to me because there's certain times in life where you're like, this is not the way it was meant to go for me. When I was envisioning what my life would be,
Yeah.
to not living in my mum's house
Yes.
at 25 in my case, or 30, like that was not how it was meant to be. Or I'm married and then my husband passes away. That is not how it was meant to go. And it's like, it's so easy to get stuck in that reality.
Yeah.
And every time someone tries to give you a solution, but it's, oh no, but this happened, you go right back into it.
Yes.
And I think what you've demonstrated a remarkable ability to do, and I think it's inspirational, and I hope it resonates and it hits with someone. It's one of the most difficult things to do, which is to let that old reality go.
Yeah.
Because once you let it go, you can start to see everything that you do have.
Yes.
And then you can start to build again.
Yes.
And you know what? I wanna talk about that building, because even at the end of that quote that I read out from your book, you said, I really felt like I had nothing to hold on to. I mean, I had my 1999 Toyota Camry. That was something, but it wasn't much. I remember thinking, how do you build from a place of nothing? And so the thing I want to do is for that person, and let's just assume that they finally let it go.
Okay.
Whatever's happened to them, they've let it go, and they're now in the mental space where they're ready to build again. And they want the information. They want the practical information. Like, what do I need to do? How do I build? And you're someone that's done it. And you've done it multiple times at different parts of your life. But let's assume that someone's building from nothing and they want to get good with money. What would you describe as step one? Because I think step one is so important. That's like where we start to build the momentum. So what would you describe as step one, where they should start?
Well, one, I would say that the lesson that I had to learn and they have to learn is that you're actually never building from a place of nothing. Like that's the key, that it's not nothing. Because you read this book, right? Oh, you can see. Oh, you can read. Is that nothing? You know what I mean? So one is that understanding that you're not actually building from a place of nothing. So let's gather the resources that we do have. It might just be a 99 Toyota Camry. It might be a couch. It might be a rented room. But let's gather those resources and take a look at them. Because it's important for you to see it's not nothing. It might not be enough, but it's something. Two, it is to forgive yourself. Because shame is there as a result of that. You are angry with yourself typically because you haven't quite lived up to whatever that thing is. And now that your mask has slipped, you're angry. Typically with yourself is to forgive yourself and let yourself know, like, I did the best that I could with the knowledge that I had. here I am. And then three, once you start to look at your resources, it's like, okay, some of the resources are, do I have any income coming in? Do I have access to any income? If you don't have any income coming in, then we have to figure out, how do we create income, coming in? What am I really good at? Um, One of the things I look for when I'm trying to make any sort of money on the side is, I ask myself, do I have anything that my education will allow me to be paid more? Or do I have experience where I don't have to learn a new skill? Because now is not the time for you to to figure out something new. It's like, okay, I used to be a teacher. Oh, I could babysit. Who doesn't want a former teacher babysitting? Oh, I could tutor. So I'm like, I'm pulling out skill sets because it's not nothing. We have something. Now that I've gathered all the resources that I do have access to, how can I monetize those things? Do I have a car? Am I able to Uber? you know so I'll give you an example of I remember I met this gentleman in Atlanta who was an Uber driver. He had like a computer next to him, and when he was like, he picked me up, he put something in the computer. When he dropped me off, I was like, what are you doing? He was like, I lost my job. I'm a statistician, somebody who works for stats, a data person. And I said, oh, so you're doing like data stuff? He said, I realized that, like he said, I was doing Uber for 6 months, and I just felt like I wasn't as efficient. So I said, what if I started to collect data on my Uber rides? And I said, okay, tell me more. He said, so every Uber ride, I would collect data about where I picked the person up, where I dropped them off, what was the weather, how much I made per stop. He said, and I realized in this area on rainy days, I make 4 times the amount. I don't need to go out every day. If I work just these rainy days, it actually means I could be home more than half the time. He gathered his resources. I know data.
Mhm.
And so that was one of the things. It's like, I have nothing. No, no, no. You have your data mind. He's using that. I couldn't believe. I said, well, how much did you make last year? He said $70,000. I was like, what? And he said, now with the excess, I've started to invest. So you imagine the rich Uber driver, because he recognized that, like, I lost something, but not everything.
Mm.
And so that's what I mean. What is your I know data? What is that thing that you could put to work and monetize that thing so you can have income starting to come in? Everyone has something. I don't care. Maybe you're really good at cooking. Maybe you're like, you know what? I was really pretty good at cutting hair. Maybe I've seen this, like, I remember I used to go to this local AutoZone where I live in Newark, and there were out of work mechanics in the parking lot that would like do minor fixes for you. And I remember thinking, like, that was genius. Because I mean, I'm coming out. I don't know how to put the light bulb in my car. I don't know how to, change my tire or whatever I was going to. And they would do it right there with their tools right there in the parking lot. I'm like, to find their perfect audience, because I lost everything. Did you lose everything? Because you still know how to fix cars, right? Well, I'm going to go to AutoZone and do it right here.
Mm.
You see what I mean? And so that's where I would tell people who are feeling like financial rock bottom is they're going to have to ask themselves, what tools and resources do I still have available? And how can I start to monetize them in ways that are creative if the traditional ways are not available to me anymore?
Yeah. You know what? So in the book, you have the section where you say like the do,
Mm-hmm.
and for increase your income,
Mm-hmm.
you have maximize your earning potential at work,
Mm-hmm.
assess your skills, decide which of these skills you can monetize, put a number on it,
Mm-hmm.
and decide what's your income potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you just described, because I think it's something really practical that
Mhm.
people can do, which is a lot of the time, and I think sometimes people get frustrated with like personal finance advice, because they're like, really, I just need more money.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can save the heck out of this, but like, I need more money.
Yes.
And it's almost this, I think the underlying feeling is, I need something which I don't have right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I like what you described, because it's like, well, why don't you just pull out a sheet of paper and start to just observe your life?
Yes.
Like, what are you already doing? Because a lot of the times, and I've fallen into this cycle, is we take for granted our own skills.
Yes.
And we think that like everyone can do that.
Yeah.
No, everyone can't. I don't do light bulbs in
Yes.
cars. That does not go well.
I mean, you look at kids. Kids are like the best place to learn, right? You will see like a 14-year-old who has his dad's lawnmower walking up and down the street to ask to mow lawns. They're not hung up on, and they're like, no, I got a lawnmower and I got a strong arm. That's it. I made $100 today. Or you see kids with their lemonade stand. I've got $10 of lemonade mix and water or whatever. That's it. Sometimes we overcomplicate
Mm.
of like, oh, well, no. What do you have? Put those two things together. Put it to work. I remember I had a friend who was like out of work and they're like, oh, it's only gonna make me $200. It's 200 more than you had.
Mm.
It's 200 more than you had. Sometimes we get hung up on that too. Like it's not enough. Well, it's way more than you have now. You start with two. If I always say if you can make 20, you can make 200. If you can make 200, you can make 2,000. You can make 2,000, you can make 20,000 because it's cumulative learning.
Mm.
So if you don't start with that 20, you're not going to get to that 20,000.
Mm.
You know? So it's like maximize the skill set that you currently have. And if you do have a job, like how do you make yourself so invaluable they find the money for you? You know, and if they don't find the money for you, that you're so invaluable that you can go someplace else. I have a woman on my team. Her name is Aikeisha. And when she first started, I think she was doing like customer support or something like that. Aikeisha is like, I don't even know. She's like a savant because anything you put in front of her, she's gonna figure it out. So like Aikeisha started off like doing, like I said, customer support. And then I heard that she really wanted to do some project management. And I said, well, help me manage the launch of Get Go Money. She's like, well, I've never done that before. I was like, well, we'll learn together. She slayed it because New York Times, 8 weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list. Then Aikeisha started managing other projects for me. And so we hired this tech team. Something was wrong with the website, but it was a weekend and nobody was available. And so Aikeisha said, I could take a look. She figured it out. I was like, how? She's like, I don't know. She's like, I was watching a YouTube video and I was playing around with it. And so every time I turn around, Aikeisha is collecting a new skill set that makes me say, please, God, don't let Aikeisha leave me.
Mm.
You know, so because here's the thing, even if I didn't have the money to pay Aikeisha what she wanted, she now has the skill set where she can now go someplace else and get paid what she wants. You know what I mean? And so, like, if you're at your current job now, are you making yourself ultra valuable, or are you complaining, I hate this place?
Mm.
Which I can understand. You can hate this place and still make yourself valuable so you can get paid more or get paid more someplace else. You
Mm.
know, we have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for. And so
Mm.
many people leave so much power on the table. And when you leave power on the table, you leave money on the table.
Mm. You know, I think it's such good advice, which is like, I remember someone told me this when I was working. They were like, you just want to make your manager's life easy.
Yes.
So just pay attention. I think a lot of things actually in life can be solved by just paying
Mhm.
attention. Like what are the pain points? What are like the consistent things that are difficult for them? You master how to do it.
Mhm.
You keep acquiring those skills.
Mhm.
I'm curious to get because I know that there's someone that's listening that like they've been in that process
Mhm.
of they've acquired the skills, they've become invaluable, but their pay has not budged at all. And they don't think I've had moments like that
Mm.
where months and months and months and performance reviews and all of this stuff, and maybe they were even getting the credit, but it's not showing up in that final salary. You're not getting paid what you think you should be paid. How should people kind of navigate that conversation where of getting what they feel like is fair for them from like a payment salary perspective?
Well, one, you want to make sure that you connect with people in your industry so you know what is fair pay. You know, like if fair pay is 100,000, you're getting 200, then you know you want to make sure you even understand what are you asking.
Mm.
You know, so that's important. Two, sometimes people don't pay because either they don't have the money or they basically they're taking advantage of you. You know, and so if you find that they don't have the money or they're taking advantage of you because you have those skill sets, you don't have to stay there. You should always be networking. You know, like it's important that I call it illustrate your Oprah, right? Column. So like let's just say Oprah phone rings, ring, ring, ring. She says, if you guys can get together $100,000 in the next 24 hours, I will open up my Rolodex to you and make you an introduction to whoever, whatever business, whatever that you want. $100,000, you got 24 hours, go. You and I would find that $100,000 because we know that access to who Oprah knows and her making a connection is worth way more than $100,000. It might be an asset management firm. It might be a foundation, you know, that wants to like donate. It might be, we don't know what it could be, you know? And so for that, we know that Oprah's value is so obvious that we'd be willing to find the money. And so the problem is people have value, but they have not illustrated it.
Mm.
You know, have you illustrated your Oprah? Oprah's not behind the scenes secret with her value. We know it. So much so that she said it. I'm like, what? There's some people I wrote a children's book. I want for my children's book to have a TV show. I'm sure she knows somebody over there at PBS or Nickelodeon or whatever. Make a phone call. Oh, you should meet Tiffany. She's so great. What? They're gonna take that call. You know, I know Oprah's not everyone's favorite these days, but she still has tremendous power and access.
Mm.
And so that's the thing I think a lot of people that you have to ask yourself, in what ways are you illustrating your Oprah? When you're meeting with your manager, are you showing definitive ways that you have added value to this company? Or are you, like so many people, especially women, will hope they'll just see it?
Mm.
You know, are you like my sister calls it a go me file, where literally every time she does something for the company where she works, she says, go me, and we'll write it down. I helped on this day to close this deal, which added this amount of money, quantify it. This is the thing that added $50,000 to the down, to the bottom line. This saved the company $100,000. So that way, when you meet with your manager, you can say, in the last 6 months, I have added $600,000 worth of business, or I have saved the company $300,000 as a result of my tasks. Quantify it as much as possible,
Mm.
because then you're not even asking for a raise. We're just asking for a price adjustment,
Mm.
right? Because what it sends to the manager is, if this person leaves, they take $600,000 with them for the next 6 months.
Mm.
Or we might be overpaying another $200,000 for the next 6 months.
Mm.
So you're going to have your manager really thinking, like, I don't know. And even if they say no, now you have a skill set that you could take with you, and you should be networking. So people should already be knowing the value that you bring to the table, so you can find someplace else that does have the money, the means, and the desire to pay you fairly.
Mm. I love that, the Go Me file. And because I think sometimes it's like, if you just input these like small habits,
Mhm.
and it feels kind of annoying when you're working, like you achieve something and then you instantly note it down.
Mhm.
But in the long run, it's so valuable for the reason that you described, which is you take something that is subjective,
Mhm.
like what's your value, or
Yes.
how much do I feel like I should get paid? And you just make it objective.
Yes.
It's just math, it's just numbers.
Yes.
And if the value that you're bringing is higher than the pay rise, then they're probably going to give you that pay rise, because it's detrimental for them to lose it.
People don't ask. Like, I was so impressed with our producer, right? I know he's like sitting there. So I was so impressed with him because you were sitting here and you said, can you take some pictures?
Mm.
And he said, sure. Should I invoice you now or later? I was like, that's what I'm talking about. Because so many people are like, sure, I guess. But in the back of their mind, well, this is really additional fee. And no, I love that. People don't ask, so they don't receive.
Mm.
That cost instantly. It wasn't big. It wasn't like, sure. It's like, and you were like, no, yeah, I do want to do it. How much would like, you got to make the decision. You could have been like, oh, I didn't realize it was an extra cost. You know what? Never mind. We'll just take some cell phone pictures. But instantly he let you know, there's a value that I bring to the table. It's going to cost. Do you still want to move forward? I
Mm.
thought that was genius. Most people never ask, despite how much value they bring to the table. Why should we work for free? Not on Harriet Tubman's internet. Right? What the hell? Right? So I just thought that was so impressive. And I think just the practicing of asking. So, Aikeisha on my team and Logan on my team, there's so many valuable people on my team. But I remember I thought to myself, like, I want to be able to pay people more, my full-time workers more. And so I couldn't afford the raises. 2023 was a really hard financial year. And so people were asking for raises left and right. I was like, I don't have it. I don't have it. So that was an instance where it was like, Tiffany, you might lose good people, not because you don't want to pay, but because you just don't have. And so I did two things. I opened up the book so everyone could see this is where we are financially. I took a pay cut. Me not paying you is not because I don't want to, and not because I don't see your value. We just don't have it. I'm taking a pay cut just to maintain salary. And then two, what if we created a bonus pool that paid out quarterly? What if you got paid like me? And they're like, what does that mean? I said, well, I get a base salary and then I get an owner's draw, which if there's excess after paying all the bills, after the savings and taxes, if there's excess money, I get to draw that money out of the company. There's been some years my owner's draw has been 7 figures, and some years my owner's draw has been nothing. It's based upon the company, like how it's doing. And I said, what if that's you? And so they said, okay. So I said, this way you get paid based upon how the company's doing, that excess money you're asking for. But it never puts us in jeopardy because it's after everything's been taken care of. So for the first 6 months, there was nothing. But then they started to get really like, we want to put money in that payroll pool. And so this last 6 months, they did so well that the owner's draw, I mean, the payroll, the bonus pool looks like this, that whatever we make for the quarter, minus all of our bills and payroll and everything else, I put 20% of what I would have drawn as an owner. So if I was going to draw $100,000 because we had a really good quarter, whatever, I put 20,000 of my 100,000 into this bucket. And now you full-time employees get to have this bucket. The percentage of the bucket is a percentage of the payroll that you get.
Mm,
So if you get paid $100,000 a year and that's 20% of payroll, then 20% of that bonus bucket is yours.
mm,
And so the first time they got their bonus from the bonus bucket last quarter, it was, I don't put their business out there, but it was like a few $1,000s. And they were like, okay, like that's cute. No, this time around, it was like $20,000. And they were like, wait, what? Each.
mm.
And so I can only imagine the next one. So by the end of this year, maybe they'll have made $50,000. And that's way more. I was not going to give you a $50,000 raise. But now I figured out a way to link their value to the work that they do without sinking the company. But I only did that because they illustrated their Oprah so much. I said, I cannot lose them. I will find the money. And that's what happens when you illustrate your Oprah and you're at the right place. They will find the money for you,
Mm,
And if not, you take your skills and talent someplace else where they will find the money for you,
mm.
you know?
I love that. That's actually great. I quickly want to get into side hustles.
Mhm,
And one of the things that you mentioned having that kind of list of skills or
mhm.
things that you can do. And one of the things, even in the book, which is the third bullet point, decide which of these skills you can monetize.
Yes.
And I know there's people that are listening, maybe they have their list with their skills.
Mhm.
And a lot of the times we have like skills in different areas, right? And so maybe I'm good at marketing, but I also know a bit of PowerPoint and I also do, I don't know, a bit of stats and data. And so, how should someone make the decision of, okay, this is one of the skills that could then be a side hustle for me?
Well, one, if you're looking for a side hustle, not you're starting a small business, but a side hustle, then you're gonna look for the skill set that you can monetize as quickly as possible. I call it simple and soon. What can we get up and running like in 48 hours? So if your skill is like, oh, I'm really good at data analytics, but I'm also really good at cooking, which one is gonna make you money quicker? You already have 5 people that said, if you ever make dinners, let me know. Start making dinners tonight. You know? Like where can you have the least investment with the biggest return? People give you the money for the dinners. I make them. Who's your $200? Thank you so much. So we're not looking for like what makes your heart beat faster. It's like what can I monetize quickly now? You got a camera. I remember a friend of mine was struggling financially. His kid was in played baseball. And he said, I make baseball cards for kids because his kid's like in middle school or something like that. So he took his camera to the field, took pictures of kids, showed parents because he created the baseball cards like on his computer there and said, hey, would you like, you know, would you like these baseball cards? It's X amount of dollars. He lives in DC where there are I remember it was graduation time. He took his camera, was basically like, hey, I take pictures. Would you like me to take pictures of you? It was making money right then and there because he had a camera. Does that make sense? Like, we're
Mm,
not here to make it complicated, just simple and suited. Ask yourself of all the ways I can make money, how quickly. If you're not sure, Google some of those things and see how are people making money in that space.
mm,
You know what I mean? I would let's just say you're a cake maker. How much are they charging? Let me go to a cake site. Oh, they don't have the price listed. Call them. Hi, I wanted a cake made. How much would that be? And how quickly can you deliver it? So now you have your price point and your delivery model.
mm,
Does that make sense?
mm,
And so that's what I would do is that right away, I would say, I'm not trying to get fancy. I'm just trying to ask myself, well, what could I quickly start within? If I can't start it within 48 to 72 hours, at least get the ball rolling, then it's probably too complicated
mm.
and I want to start to make money now because money begets money. As you get good at it, then you can expand to say, okay, now I can add something else, or maybe I can pivot. But in this moment, I need to show myself I know how to make money.
Mm,
I love that way of thinking about it because I know there's so many people that feel like underwater. Like when they come to their finances, they're constantly feeling that squeeze.
Mhm.
And so it's like the first thing you need to do is actually just create space for yourself.
Yes.
You need to create a bit of cushion, which is like, well, if I had an extra $500, $1,000 a month, that would be meaningful to me.
Yes.
Like that would make me feel a lot better.
Yes.
And so you start with that. What's the skill that will give me that extra
Yes.
$500,000 cushion? And even in your story, it's like you always had this skill of teaching and you had the financial literacy and that education from a kid,
Hmm.
basically. And it started off quite small, like, well, definitely small in terms of what you're doing now. But then it kept going and going. And so that's the second thing that I love that you said, which is like money begets money.
Yes.
That it's actually the thing that was making you $1,000 a month can start making you 5,000 a month,
Yes.
10,000 a month. What have you found? I'm curious, even of people that you coach or speak with,
hmm
what is that difference in someone going from, okay, my side hustle is making $1,000, but I'm actually kind of loving doing it and it's giving me a lot of flexibility.
hmm
How do I turn it from $1,000 into 5,000, 10,000, and start thinking even about leaving my job if I wanted to potentially?
Well, one, you have to set the financial goal. So 500 was my like initial goal. Like if I could just make 500 because my room that I'm renting costs 500. So you have to set the financial goal because you'll meet your goal. Like the aim is like if I can make 500, but I realized that was too small of a goal because got to 500. I'm like, well, I need to move beyond this. So one, set financial goals that are like slightly beyond what you feel is possible. So you know what to reach for. And then you start to do the math backwards. I remember when I said, okay, instead of 500, which I was trying to do one-on-ones. And I was like, if I can charge $100 per person, if I could do 5 people a month, that seems realistic. I said, okay, well, what if you would did 1,500? I'm like, well, I can't do 1,500 people. Like 1,500 people is 15 people a month. That might be too much. I said, well, maybe you're thinking about it wrong because when you set a bigger goal, it forces you not to think about brute strength, but mind strength. It goes from I could do 5 people to I don't want to do 15 people in a month. That's too much. So who said you have to do 15 people in a month? Can you do 15 people in one sitting? I was like, uh-huh. What would that look like? Who would pay me for 15 people in one sitting? Or who pays people to speak? Girl, you're not inventing speaking. I'm like, and I remember it was like my college friend, his brother had just became like the sophomore class president. And we were celebrating at his house. He's like, oh my God, I'm sophomore class president. We're like, woohoo. I was like, well, what does that even mean? He's like, we could hire speakers. I said, you could hire speakers? What does that mean? He was like, yeah, we can hire speakers to speak. I said, well, how much do you guys usually hire speakers for? He said $1,500 is what they can hire because they gave the kids a budget. And he was like, if anything above that, I'd have to go ask like the advisor for more money. I said, well, I speak. And he hired me. My first $1,500 to speak. And that's when the light bulb opened to like, okay, because I'm not going to do 15 people for the month. One sitting, it was maybe 200 kids, $1,500. I said, well, how do I get to 15,000? Do you see? And so it forces you to think beyond what you can physically do. It forces you to become more strategic, to ask yourself that question. It forces you to actually ask for help because the only way that I went from 6 figures, because 6 figures was brute strength. I just grinded every day, every day, every day, every day, unsustainable. And to get to 7 figures, I had to bring on help. And it took me 5 years to get to 6 figures. It took me 2 years, 2 or 3 years to get to 7 figures. It took me a year and a half to get to 8 figures in a year. Because I finally learned that it's not about me. And now the opportunities that are before me now, it potentially 9 figures. And the lift for me is barely anything. I realized that in order for you to really make more, you have to pull yourself out of the working, you know, that you really have to be the strategic planner and thinker. But the truth is, you can't just jump there. You actually have to work at first.
Mm.
Like if I was not hands in the muck working, I would not be prepared for the mindset things that I have to do now. If that makes sense, because can't nobody get over on me. When someone says, well, that's going to be $30,000. I'm like, sis, I did that 6 years ago. That don't take 6 hours. And if it takes you 6 hours, you're not competent. Oh, you thought I didn't know? Because I built my website 6 years ago.
Mm.
I did my email list. I did my social media. So like, it's okay. You shouldn't despise humble beginnings. And so learning to work the business with your hands is a good start, but you should always be planning of how do I pull myself out? Because you won't be able to get to like the next level if it's always you doing the manual work.
Mm. I love that advice of someone just pulling out a piece of paper and whatever the goal is,
hmm
whatever that money number, that income potential, net worth, whatever it is, just writing it down.
Yep.
Because in the second that you do that, you make it more real.
Yes.
And it's like you also start this process, and this is what I've seen with myself, is that it's like you always have these kind of new targets. And how many people, even if you went up to them on the street or your friends or peers at work, could you go to and ask, like, what's their target for the next quarter or the next year? And they could straight away tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like most of the time we have no idea even what we're aiming for.
Yes.
And so we were speaking earlier about like the importance of your mind being open.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like when you were getting into those conversations or you're asking people about how much they charge for speaking,
Mm-hmm.
it was like you knew what the goal was.
Mm-hmm.
You knew the number. And so you were always in your environment looking for opportunities to
Yes.
hit that number.
Exactly.
And I think that that's why it's like just that practical step of like
Yes.
taking the time to consider it and writing it down. I'm actually going to do that after this episode.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to be clearer.
There is this, I think Princeton had done a study where people writing down their goals, and it made your goals like 60 to 80% more likely to happen. Just the act of writing them down. They did like a 10-year study of like high school students that wrote down their goals versus those who didn't, and then tracking them 10 years later. And they were like 60 to 80% more likely to happen because writing them down makes you see them. Like honestly, almost everything that I'm living now, I have written down. Like in my, I don't know if it's in this wallet, I used to carry this laminated check that like I remember it was said like from a very happy client. And I remember the check said $10,000 and then I made 10,000. And then it was $50,000 and I made 50. Then it was whatever, $1 million and I made $1 million. And so I keep upping it because I'm writing down. I'd heard Jim Carrey did that. Like I'm trying to make the thing real for myself. I keep journals. So I do vision boards. I was just looking at a vision board that I'd lost, that I found it in my closet from 5-6 years ago. And I would say more than half the stuff on that board, I had lived an experience. I was like, oh my God, I wrote on here I wanted to go to Egypt. I did. And just something as like Charlotte, North Carolina was on there. I just came back from there. I forgot that it was on my vision board. I have on there New York Times bestseller. That was 6 years ago. I didn't even have a book deal. I didn't even have a book deal. I wrote New York Times bestseller. I said 100,000 copies sold. I sold 100,000 in my first year. We're up to 300,000 sold. That was on there without even a book deal. And there were some things on there that I was just like, wow. So whatever writing down looks like for you, whether it's a vision board, whether it's voice notes, whether it's like, actual pen and paper, get your dreams out of your head, into your hand, and onto something physical so you can check in and check on them frequently.
Yeah. You know what? I love that. You know, even in the beginning of the episode, I read out some of those statistics. So 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 69% of households have less than $1,000 in emergency savings. 34% of all Americans have $0 in savings. And so I'm kind of curious for you, like, I think we hear so much personal finance advice and we hear things about budgeting and saving and credit and debt and all of these things. Is there anything that in your mind when you have something that it would have such a large impact for people in terms of their personal finances, but it's largely being ignored? Like people never think about it. It's the thing that's never discussed. What kind of comes to mind for you on that?
I think the intentional building of community around you. I think that we hear it, but I have a 9-figure opportunity that came to me because of someone in my community who I met at an event. She was super nice. We stayed in contact via text message. I saw her recently. She invited me to go out to eat with her. There was a bunch of other people there. And this opportunity is now before me. A 9-figure opportunity, potentially. That's community. There's certain doors that you cannot open. There's no knob for you. Someone on the inside has to open and bring you in and then let everyone know she's here. Like, this is what you should know about her. This is what you... And so I think people think that like this like rugged individualism that we like to tout in America is BS. That anyone who's made it to any level of grand success has done so within community. Someone has put them forward. You have to constantly be networking, and not networking from a place of what can I get, but what can I give? Like I like to connect for connecting's sake, because what will happen is you connect with somebody, they're really cool. You met them at an event, 5 years later, 10 years later, something comes up. My first 6-figure contract with a brand, it was a woman who took, I have an online challenge I used to do every year called the Live Richer Challenge. It was free. And she worked for this car brand. And she'd been telling them about me, telling like she was telling them, she was telling them about me for like 2 years. You should work with Tiffany. You should work with Tiffany. You should work. I did not know this. Just because we connected and I met, she's like, she's so nice. And she followed what I was doing. She told them. Finally, after 2 years, they said, okay, it was $100,000 contract. That was the check that I had written for myself. I'm like, no one's gonna pay you $100,000. They paid me $100,000.
Mm.
I couldn't believe it. And I mean, since now, that's not even nearly my biggest contract. But at the time, it was like, oh my goodness. And that was as a result of community. And I think everyone wants to talk about like certainly, there's investing. We all know that to grow wealth. There's saving, there's budgeting, there's getting your credit together. There's all these other things, but access to people who have access is paramount because you can invest and do all these other things and then be shut out of whatever the next level or state because it takes a person.
Mm.
Are you actively working on connecting with people? And like I said, connecting for connecting's sake. Almost every opportunity I've ever had. Like I met you because Arlen texted me, right? She texted me, oh my God, I was on this amazing podcast. You should be on. Da-da. I was like, I love Arlen. I said, okay. I didn't even know anything about you. And I looked, I'm like, wow, this is a major podcast. She's like, yes, girl. And I'm here as a result of community. And
Mm.
so to me, that is the secret sauce to success is are you not only developing your community, are you maintaining it? Are you taking care of it? Are you checking in? Like I take walks with friends in business. Like one of my favorite things to do. Like I was like, let's take a walk at a park and we'll talk about business. I check up on them, their kids. Are you good? Let's go for lunch. Like building those communities. There's a great book called Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. He's the man who he's passed away, but he wrote the book the Delivering Happiness. What was that?
He
Zappos.
built Zappos, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like
And
billion
so
dollar company,
yes,
sold to Amazon. Right?
Amazon, yes, and brilliant man, sad but brilliant. And that's one of the things he said. He said, I just would connect with people and we would become really cool. And then 10 years later, it's like a multi-million-dollar contract. I wouldn't have known that. Like, are you actively working on getting to know people? Like, I'm really personable. I'm a girl's girl. And like, I have 4 sisters. So I'm really like, so what's going on with you? And those are really cute shoes. And before you know it, you're in another room and you're like, oh. And then they introduce you like their bestie, like, hey, Vice President, this is Tiffany. And I'm like, I didn't know you knew the Vice President. You were just a girl in the bathroom who had cute shoes. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so yeah, community, community, community.
Yeah. You know what? You know what's interesting? I think especially like people from our community, I think so often it's difficult because in a lot of ways we're products of our environment,
Mhm.
right? There's that quote, that old adage, you're like the average of the 5 people you hang around the most or you spend the most time with.
Mhm.
And it's like I can almost hear the frustration from people. I felt it in my life as well, which is, well, if everyone around me also is living paycheck to paycheck,
Mhm.
or everyone around me, they also don't have savings, or they also kind of struggling to pay rent, it's like a lot of the times we don't have access to the people that have access. And so there's like this frustration of like, well, how do I get into those circles? Like those people aren't like me. And I guess the underlying mindset is it's almost like there's like the haves and the have-nots. And there's this group, this stratosphere that I can't access. And I'll never be able to access it.
Well, I'm
And
going to
so
challenge you on that. I'm going to say, is that true? Is that the only truth? So you don't have social media?
Mm,
You can't get in the Reddit forum?
mm,
You can't get in the Facebook group? I know it's old school, but there's a lot of really great Facebook groups. Like I know people who met their business partner on Clubhouse.
mm,
I know that you live in Timbuktu, wherever in Illinois, and there's one cow and a donkey and a farm, and that's it. And yet somehow you're on social media.
mm,
Where people who literally you can meet someone in China who is interested in learning English and you exchange, they teach you Chinese, you learn English. Like that's the thing. That's what I mean. That's the narrative. Because who wins with that narrative when you tell yourself, like, I hear you, I know the person, 'cause I can feel them too. Oh, no. Social media is the great connector.
mm,
Like, you know how many people, I mean, I'm not a gamer, but I've heard people say that they are closer with some of their gamer friends who they've never met. People have been gaming with the same people since high school and they're in their 30s. I remember there was this cute video of this guy who had never met his gamer friend, asked him to be his best man because they had been playing together for 15 years in his wedding. So you can make connection. It doesn't have to be you sitting right next to me in Newark, New Jersey.
Mm,
You can make connection right online if you are willing,
mm.
And so, yeah.
You know what? Can you? I think it's so good what you're saying, and I want people to be able to take it home and do something with it. Like I want no excuses for anyone. Can you give an example of how you reach out? Because I think sometimes, someone might be listening and they might see you, for example, and they're like, she runs like this really successful company. She has so much going on. She's a New York Times bestseller. She does speaking. She's
Mhm.
at the vice president's residence. Like, she's never going to respond to my email. And there's like, they don't even know how to reach out. They've put you on such a pedestal. They don't even know how to be personable, how to be like just a human that you'd even want to have just an initial conversation with.
Mhm.
And so can you give some advice on that? Like how should someone, that person that I'm seeing online, or maybe I don't even know, wherever I'm seeing them, I just want to reach out and do it in a way that, they're going to be receptive.
So one, you I don't know if you ever see little kids when they learn to play at the park, right? So a kid is watching other kids play. First thing they do is they bring their toys over. You want to play with me? Not empty-handed, because some people reach out to take. I don't even know you. Hey, Tiffany, I'd love to partner. Can you do this, this? You sound crazy. I don't respond to those because it shows me that you're actually not interested in partnership. You are interested in extracting value and keeping it moving. And 90% of the people that reach out, that is the energy. So it's not very hard to find the 10% that actually respond to. The 10% that I respond to is one, oh my gosh, I just wanted to tell you, thank you so much for what you did. This changed my life in this way. Thank you. And they keep it moving. Oh, that was nice. Not asking for anything, just here to share kindness.
Mm,
That's huge. You start to build a relationship from kindness. Hey, girl, I see you out there. I saw you at the VP's residence. That was it. And before you know it, you can have a rapport for 6 months of someone just checking in. I noticed you haven't been online in a while. You all right? Now I'm writing back and forth. There are people who I've never met who that's how we converse online, you know? And then they might be like, well, my company is having a thing. Would love if you could speak. I would at least consider it from my internet friend who I've never met, but has always been kind, has not asked me for anything. That's one. Two, be like the little kid. Bring your toy to play with. Hey, Tiffany, I noticed that your videos are really great, but honest, I'm even better at making reels. Here's an example. Would love to make a reel for you. I'm looking for someone to make reels right now. All of a sudden, I'm like, girl, let's get on the phone. It went from I can never connect with Tiffany to I'm on the phone with Tiffany and I'm gonna make reels for her. People come with no toys to play with,
mm,
and you wonder why you don't have any friends at the park.
mm,
You know what I mean? Bring something to the table. Don't make me ask for it. You're wanting to take and extract. You're not gonna.
mm.
You know what I mean? And so that is like literally, that's what I do. You think I don't slide in people's DMs? Hey sis, congratulations on your book deal. I don't know if you know, but my book hit a New York Times bestsellers list. And I have this class that I taught for my mentees. It's a 2-hour class, 8 pages of notes, time stamped. I would love to share with you and your team. Here's the link.
Mm.
Everybody's my best friend. You know how many other New York Times bestsellers that spawned? No, I'm not asking for anything, just building relationships. I always come with gifts. Hey, I see that, you're going to go speak at such and such event. I spoke there last year. If you ever want to jump on a call, I can share what I wish I would have known. Here's some things. And then people are like, oh my God, I've been on the phone with some of I call the blue check brigade, like some of the biggest names you could ever imagine, just because I've just been like, I don't want anything, just sharing this thing with you. A
Mm.
year, 2 years, 3 years. People are not patient either. 5 years from now, they hit me up. I was just telling such and such about you. You should come to this fancy schmancy event where you're going to meet this investor. Da, 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 da. All because I slid into your DMs and I shared something positive with you. That's how you do that.
Mm.
Either slide in to share just straight positivity or reach out with a toy in your hand and say, can we play? But bring the toy
Mm.
because I'm already playing. I'm already at the park. So whether you come or not, I get to play. So if you're going to play, bring value to the table already.
Mm. You know what I love about this conversation, and obviously you have an amazing story, and I knew that coming in, but it's what you mentioned in the beginning about living a life of service,
Yes.
and it's even the way that you described the outreach.
Yeah.
It's like so often we're thinking about what can I take,
Yes.
what do I need, and a lot of the times we've built up to the point where we're like desperate, and now it's like okay, I need the sponsorship thing, and I need this, and I need this, and I need this, and it's like you're just living a life of service.
Yes.
And every now and then you're just dropping these little hooks, these little
Yeah.
things to everyone. And eventually, you don't know when it's going to happen.
Yes.
And you don't put the pressure, but some point it's going to pay dividends. But it's not even that you're necessarily trying for it to
Yep.
pay dividends. But
Just
that's
kindness.
why it works.
Because if you do that enough, let's just say I reach out to 20 people in a year, eventually one of those fish are gonna bite. And I'm like, sometimes people will come up to me and they'll give me an opportunity. I'm like, I don't even remember. Remember that time you jumped on the phone with me? Da, da, da. No. Well, anyway, I work for this big old company. We have a $50,000 contract. I'm like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many times because I'm not dropping them and looking at the fish lines. And no, I'm just dropping off kindness. And then sometimes a fish bites and you're just like, wow, I don't even remember having that call with you. It sounds like something I would have said. Usually that's what I say. I'm like, what did I say? That sounds like me.
Yeah.
But I cannot tell you how many doors that's open. And I'm just like, wow, kindness goes a long, 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 long way. Kindness for kindness' sake, not kindness for getting sake. Because
Mhm.
people can tell that too. You know, if you connect with somebody who's really successful, believe me, they can smell that from a mile away. You don't ever want to do that. You want to be helpful for helpful sake. But yeah, that's simple as that. Because it's like it's not true that you can't have access to people. You absolutely can.
Yeah.
It's just that most people just go about it the wrong way. They're looking to take and not to give. And truly, like service is the great door opener.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? And it's funny because usually, and we need to get out of here, but usually I feel like we could talk for
Yeah.
like hours probably. But usually right at the end of the conversation, I'm like, what's that final question that I wanna ask? And this episode's a bit different for me. I actually don't have a final question I want to ask. I think it's just I have so much respect, so much admiration. And it's funny because I watched some of your other interviews and I've heard you even speak about what happened with your husband.
Mhm.
And I can tell it's something that's still so personal and still so real for you. And I think I just admire the fact that you step into this room and you live out what you preach,
Yeah.
which is being of service, which is even sharing that story and all of its vulnerability and everything that comes with it. And so I don't have a final question to ask. I just want to say just thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for sharing what you did with everyone. And just keep being you because it's special.
Thank you.
It's special. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
So you asked me before, what do I think that the grandmothers, the CFO, all those people saw in me to like speak that life over me? What do you see? 'Cause I'm more like, like what do you think?
Mm. You know what? I think it's there's a core humanity to you.
Mm.
There's like there's a spirit which you can't really put your finger on it, but there's a humor, there's a way in the way even you laugh, the way that you speak, there's an energy to it. And I think even despite everything that you've achieved and the millions of dollars and the law being signed and all of these things, there's something of like, she's just here with me. She's present.
Mhm.
She's where her feet are.
Mm.
And I think people can feel that. People that have that ability, they tend to really resonate with people and have that connection. And if you can do that and you can figure out all of the other business stuff and the marketing, and it's what we're trying to do right now with the
Yeah.
show, right? Like you figure out all the things around that, but at the core of it is that human connection. And if you can do that, then, everything's on the table. The world's your oyster.
Mm.
And I think that's kind of what I felt. Just the whole conversation, I felt it. It's the way that you even share the stories and the way that you speak. There's like, she's here with me.
Mm.
That's powerful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Can I share? I meant to share like a tool, a resource with your
Yeah, go for it.
So, we have good with money. And so to your point of writing things down, to me, that's really powerful, obviously. And if you're wanting to write down what your goals are, if you DM me on IG the word goals, I will send you my goal sheet. It's my Get Good with Money goal sheet. So you can start writing down what your financial goals are because we're already more than halfway through with the year, but it's not too late to turn those things around. If you want to confess your financial soul, you can do that too. No judgment. But yeah, you just type goals in the DMs and I will instantly just send you this free goal sheet where you can start the process of writing down because it's not true that you have nothing.
Mhm.
You have something. It is not the only truth available to you. So
Mm.
I can't wait to see everybody on the other side.
I hope you're ready. People are going to be in your DMs confessing
That's
all sorts
okay.
of things to you.
It won't be the first time. It will not be the first or the last. I mean, people confess everything from I'm homeless, I don't know what to do, to I just inherited $3 million from my grandmother.
Mm.
I mean, I remember one lady, I was like, girl, do not tell people this. She said, I'm not telling people, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Like people tell me all, it's the preschool teacher energy because little kids used to tell me all their business because they know that I'm not going to judge. I'm going to love them anyway. So, yes, I do not mind that. Honestly, it does not bother me. If you don't have a safe space, I don't mind being a safe space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, special conversation. Tiffany Aliche, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It's really a dream for me that I get to do this. It's surreal that this is what I do full time and every week. So if you enjoy the content, if you enjoyed the conversation, the stories, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us immeasurably with growing the channel, with getting guests, all of those things. So please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.